Good morning, everybody. Thanks for waiting. I want to welcome you to the Economic Development Conference here at the National League of Cities. This is the opening plenary session. My name is Bill Fulton. I'm the mayor of Ventura, California, and also the economic development columnist for Governing magazine. And feel free to go to the bookstore and buy my book of columns from Governing if you'd like. I got that. All right, that's out of the way. Now we can do what we're supposed to do here. This is a panel, a brief panel in the plenary session on economic development with some mayors who are well known for their economic development efforts. So we have on my far right, I don't mean it that way, but way over there, we have Rick Becker, who formerly the mayor of St. Petersburg, and right next to me, Carl Brewer, the mayor of Wichita, Kansas. Mayor Becker was mayor of St. Petersburg from 2001 to 2010, and he is the author most recently of a book about his experiences in economic development in St. Petersburg called The Seamless City. Mayor Brewer has been mayor, I think, since 2010, and prior to that was a member of the Wichita City Council.
2007.
2007, I'm sorry. So what we're going to do here is have a relatively informal conversation about cities and economic development. As all of you know, during the economic downturn, it has been very, very difficult for all of us at cities to simultaneously figure out how to maintain our revenue, how to maintain our services, how to grow our jobs, and sometimes just how to hold on. And so that's part of the reason NLC has this economic development conference here. If you look in the program, you'll see the track going all the way through to tomorrow. I will be on a panel this afternoon. I'll be participating in the small business finance sessions later on this afternoon and in the morning. But it has been an extraordinary time for cities, and it has been a time when cities have been required to take unusual, innovative, sometimes daring steps to try to maintain prosperity, maintain jobs, and maintain tax revenue. It's not easy as a city to do that because, of course, you're at the bottom of the food chain below you, the federal government and your states. And nevertheless, we've seen some extraordinarily innovative things in the last few years. So with that, I want to begin by simply asking each of the mayors to talk a little bit about the economic development efforts that they've seen in their cities, what has worked, what's not, and what the challenges are. I'll begin with Mayor Becker, now out of office. He can say anything he wants now.
That's right. Well, thank you, Mayor. And since you unabashedly promoted your book, I'll do the same. For those of you that haven't received it yet, the Manhattan Institute out of New York, I'm associated with them now, in addition to being with the University of South Florida in St. Pete. They provided copies free copies for everybody here, so if you didn't get one on the way in, be sure you get one on the way out. And I'd like to thank you for inviting me, and thank you and congratulations to you for being here and for being involved in the National League of Cities. I was very involved during my term as mayor. I think it is the greatest organization in the country in terms of providing assistance to leaders in our city, and I believe cities are very, very important. So I thank the League for putting this on, for their continued great work, and I congratulate you on being part of the League as well. And this is an important topic. You know, it's a tough time. We are stuck in a rut in a lot of ways in our national economy, and we seem to make a little progress and then fall back a little bit. And the cities have been I think that's where the greatest impact is felt. You know, when there's a blip in the national economy, you know, they may talk about the statistics on national TV, but at the cities, that's where you see your rise in your homeless rates and your foreclosure rates go up, and the impacts that has on your community. And that's when you see, you know, folks that are unemployed in your community and not able to pay their taxes and not able to live the dream that we want to have. So you guys are on the front line of it on a national basis. So it's important for us as cities, I think, to be looking at that. And I also think it's important for us to look at economic development and jobs in cities from a strategic perspective, not just kind of wait to see when we get the call that some company's thinking about leaving town or that some company's thinking about coming, but we actually approach it strategically. How do we get out in front of this issue and be driving the jobs in the economic development effort? I talk a little bit about that in my book, but I think this, in my opinion, there are two kind of overriding things that you should be looking at. Number one is constantly improving the quality of life of the city, because place to live. Their employees are going to want to live there. Their kids are going to go to the schools. Their graduates of the schools are going to come to their employees. They want to make sure they're good schools. They want to make sure it's a safe place. Most of these executives that you're talking to are going to be living in the city if they move their business there. They want it to be a nice quality of life. So they're going to look at dog parks and skateboard parks and bicycle paths and rec centers and schools and public safety, everything about the city. Now, you all are doing that every day, and I'm not going to dwell on that today because that is kind of part of our job to improve the quality of life. And I also think it should be done seamlessly. That's my concept of seamless is that we should be working on every part of the city at the same time. No part of our city should be left behind. There should not be a part of any city in America where you cross a seam, whether it's a railroad or it's a neighborhood boundary, and you come to a place you don't want to be, where it's broken windows and boarded up buildings, and you can tell it's not safe. You feel like you got to lock your door. That's not what we want. We want it to be seamless. So the quality of life is the first component, I think, of the economic development effort. Second component is making sure that you have a good, positive business environment for the businesses. I mean, businesses want to feel that they're going to a place where they're welcome and they're going to be supported and that they can thrive and succeed. They're in the process. They're in the business of making money and succeeding. So they're going to wonder, is your community one of those places where they can do that? And I believe there are 4 items that are kind of over part of that is that to be considered. Number one is that I think you have to lead from the top. I think the mayor of the city should be the head economic development person in the city, should be involved personally in every economic recruitment effort, every retention effort, should know the businesses in the community. You know, I always used to say I am unabashedly pro-business because I've not figured out how to be pro-jobs without being pro-business, because you got to have businesses to have the jobs. And so you got to support the businesses to get there, and the jobs are key. We could do a lot of great things. We have great parks. We could have great roads. We don't have any jobs in the community. We're not going to get very far. So I think you have to be pro-business, and it's got to start at the top with the mayor. Secondly, your tax and your regulatory environment have to be such that they're attractive to businesses and that they're competitive with other cities that the businesses could go to. So in our city, our main tax rates, the real estate property tax, we were not competitive with the other major states in Florida. So we worked at that. And we had 9 budgets during my term, and 4 of my budgets were during recessions. So they were not easy times, actually 5. And so we every year we tried to bring down the tax rate a little bit. In 5 of the 9 budgets, we actually reduced the tax rate, total tax rate reduction of almost 20%. And that put us in a competitive range with the other cities. Businesses are paying attention to that. They're checking where they're paying taxes versus where they're paying taxes someplace else. Regulatory environment is the same way. Every city's got their individual regulatory environment. You need to go. We should all talk to the businesses and ask them, how are we doing? Is our regulatory environment such that it's positive for businesses? And every city is going to have a different regulatory scheme that could be pro or con. But the most important one, and the one that really ticks off the most amount of businesses, is our permitting departments. And if the permitting department, in the case of our city, when I took office, it was widely talked about in the newspaper and everywhere else as being dysfunctional. If you have a dysfunctional permitting department, for bringing jobs and having people build and develop in your community. We did a lot of things, and if we get into the questions you want to talk about permitting departments, I happen to think that's a pretty important thing. I could talk about some of the specifics of what we did, but we had structural issues with our development code that had been written in the 1960s when we were developing orange groves into suburbs, and now we were a fully built-out city. We wanted new urbanization and redevelopment, and the building code just didn't match anymore, so we had to rewrite the building code. It took a lot of effort and time, and we had attitudinal problems, and with a lot of staff that felt they were the keeper of the key, and they were daring you to try to get a permit in our city, and we had to work on that as well. So you got to work on that. Working on your tax and your regulatory environment is a key component. So a third component is to know what your economic incentive portfolio are. Every state has incentives for businesses. Counties have them. Know what they are. Know who the players are that are working the incentives. Make sure whatever incentives you give, there's accountability so that if they say they're going to be jobs, there better be jobs or they lose the incentives. Know that portfolio and know what your competitors are doing as well. so you can prepare when you're trying to attract businesses to your community. And the fourth, and that'll be my last point, and I look forward to the questions, is you have to play to your strength. And I think playing to your strength means two things. First, it means knowing what your business clusters are in your community. In our community, for instance, marine science is a cluster, medical device companies is a cluster, circuitry is a cluster, financial is a cluster, tourism is a cluster, cultural tourism is a cluster. Know what those are, because you're going to have the most success of building from your existing clusters, because people want to be like around like-kind businesses. So identify your clusters, inventory your clusters, build on them. And in fact, the Federal Department of Commerce now, their EDA grants are tied to clusters that have been identified. So you very much need to make sure that you identify the clusters and work to build those clusters within your community. Second part of playing to your strength is don't forget your existing businesses. You know, most chambers I've ever talked to or seen before will tell you that 80% of the new jobs in our community next year will come from existing businesses in our community. 80%. And yet we often spend most of our time going after the brass ring, the businesses that aren't here yet that we're trying to get in. So we had a concerted effort. I actually visited the businesses on a regular basis, and I would sit down with a business and their leadership, and I would first thank them for doing business in the city and providing jobs. That doesn't happen often enough. I would then ask them, what are we doing right? Now, I always ask them that first, because once you ask them the other question, it goes forever. So what are we doing right? and then they tell me what they're doing right. And then I said, what are we doing wrong, and how can we improve, and how can we make your business succeed in our city? When they know that you care about making their business succeed, they're much more likely to become a full partner with you all the way across the board. Sometimes you'll find out they were thinking about leaving. Much better to find out sitting at the table than when you get a letter saying that we're leaving and we're pulling 100 employees out of your city or something like that. So those would be the 4 points. I think it has to be looked at strategically, and I thank you for having me here.
Thank you, Rick. Mayor Brewer, what's going on in Wichita, and what do you have to tell us about your efforts today?
Well, first of all, let me say thank you for inviting me to join you today. And, I haven't written a book, but I might by the time we're finished here. But on the mayor's comments, I guess it's not going to be like the GOP debate, because I tell you were right on target. When he was talking about, the challenges of the cities that are happening today, we all are having the exact same challenges. And that's keeping healthy, thriving businesses in our community, maintaining quality life, and trying to make sure that every person that wants a job can have a job. And with that requires us to be able to go out and to really work hard and pull together as a community to be able to protect and to preserve the businesses. I always use the term that when we're talking about our businesses, that we must always be recruiting, reclaiming, trying to reclaim businesses that we have actually lost, and retaining the businesses that we have in our community. The city of Wichita, we are in Wichita, Kansas, we are what we're known as the air capital of the world, because of the fact that we do a lot of aircraft manufacturing in the city of Wichita. And whether it be from, we have Hawker Beechcraft, we have the Boeing Company, we have Spirit Aero Systems, and we have Bombardier Learjet, and we also have Airbus. And I think I got them all, didn't I, Carrie? And Cessna. So we have, that's why we're known as the air capital of the world, and we're heavy in the aviation industry. But also we also have a lot in the agricultural industry and also in the medical industry in the city of Wichita. Quite naturally, when we hit the recession and we started losing airplane sales, the first thing that happened is individuals started getting laid off. In fact, Cessna itself, which used to be the largest employer in the city of Wichita, and it employed 12,000, 14,000 employees, ended up reducing by 50%. So can you imagine the number of people that were out there without work? And so we started looking and evaluating what we needed to do to be able to take care of these families, because at the end of the day, that's what it's all about. Taking care of the families, keeping the families there in the city of Wichita, and trying to find something else for them to be able to do. So we started looking at how we could actually take care of these families, and in Wichita, quite naturally, if that's one of the largest industries, you have both parents that are actually employed there. So we start looking at stepping up and doing some additional things and pulling together as a because we didn't know when sales were going to pick back up in the aviation industry. So we built a training institute, and knowing that we were going into a recession and partnering with the county, we went ahead and we fought through that. And I know that in many cities, we actually have a tendency to say, well, we're just going to close the doors, and we're just going to sit down, and we're just going to hold on, and we're not going to do anything. You can't do it. You have to be aggressive, and you have to recognize what those needs are. They are not going to go away, because if you do, and these other cities continue to function, you will be so far behind the curve, it will be unreal, and you will lose those businesses and that next generation of skilled workforce that you depend on so heavily upon. And businesses are going where the workforce is at, not going out and you're trying to recruit them. So from that standpoint, you have to look at the entire city as a whole and what was important, and to look at what was the vision and what was the plan originally, during the good economic times when your city was thriving. And you have to stay focused. So with that, required you to take some really bold steps in being aggressive and also taking a little bit of risk. So in doing that, recognizing our aviation industry is important to us. So is our training and our medical. We continue to invest in those types of things. And we started looking at what other cities were doing and trying to get our new ideas. We looked at other cities, whether you be Oklahoma or whether you're in Missouri or wherever you may be, and say, what are they doing? That's our competition. And they continued, all of these cities that we saw that were around us were continuing to be bold and being aggressive, and they were providing incentives, whether they be tips or whether they be IRBs or whether they be industrial revenue bonds or whatever the case may be, various different incentives to be able to help businesses grow and create more jobs, or whether they be able to recruit new businesses to your community. And quite naturally, I think with all those of us that provide those incentives know that there's a voice out there that says, no incentives. Don't give them incentives. Provide a free market. We know that they're out there. But at the end of the day, as policymakers and elected officials in the cities, we have an obligation to grow, to continue to be competitive. And you can't change the business aspects of it as what businesses are going to do. So if you don't offer it, somebody else is willing to offer it. So you must continue to be aggressive, and you must continue to take those bold stands and going out there and doing those types of things. The city of Wichita, we are always searching for new incentives and incentives that we can actually that we can provide to various different businesses. But as you heard the mayor say, everything that he said to you is absolutely correct, 110%. And that is that you must embrace the current businesses that you actually have, but you must pull everybody to the table and say, everyone in the community, no matter what their industry may be, no matter whether they may be retired or whether they're a small business or a large corporation, you must bring everyone to the table and say, this is our community, and we are going to work together to build our community. And so the city of Wichita, we've done a lot of these things, and we started looking at our downtown and wanting to grow our downtown. And one of the additional incentives, after we pull everyone together and start identifying what the vision is, and the mayor must have a vision, must be the spokesperson, must be the person out front, and must be able to take the criticism. But they must say, this is the vision that we have, and this is the direction we're going to go. And the community and those people in the community say, this is how we're going to get there. Give them a voice. And by doing that, one of the things that we did that was very, very interesting is you took competitive bankers, that came together that said, okay, the city and the state are providing these various different incentives. So what we'll do, maybe one bank cannot financially afford to be able to address the issues of this particular business or a new business wanting to come in. But maybe 3 or 4 banks can come together and be able to do it. And so in our particular case, we were able to get a conglomerate of banks to be able to come together, to be able to work, to be able to provide any type of incentives to help us as our community continues to grow. And it's been very, very successful. We've had numerous hotels that have actually opened up, and we've had numerous businesses that have taken advantage of this new opportunity. And the banks are at the table helping them through this process. So that's part of what the entire thing is about. It's about an entire community pulling together. But the other portion is one of the things that we found that's interesting in the city of Wichita. Our population is about 380,000, but we're the largest city in the state of Kansas. And when you talk about our MSA, it's probably around 600,000 or 700,000 between in our MSA area. But one of the other things that we have a tendency to forget, and I think is very, very important, individuals that most of us as policymakers, we believe that we have the answers. And those of us that are more mature in age, we believe that we have all of the answers because we've had the experience and the knowledge. So one important thing is the younger generation, the young professionals, bring them to the table. Because one of the things that we have to continue to point out to them is today we may be the mayor, we may be the governor, we may be the city council member, the county commissioner, but tomorrow they will be. So what do you want? And in the city of Wichita, they told us they wanted a good quality of life, whatever they choose it to be. They wanted green space, which was something that we didn't have, and green space in our downtown area. They weren't interested in having homes and mowing grass and those types of things. They wanted apartments and condos. And they wanted an area where they could live, they could work, and they could play all in that particular area. And they didn't necessarily want to drive. Imagine that. Young people not wanting to drive every place. They like walking. They like riding their bikes. They like skateboarding. They do a lot of different things that probably you and I wouldn't do. So bring them to the table and you allow them that opportunity to have some ownership. And when they have ownership, it's amazing the things that they can do and the energy that they have, that they can move things forward. So, in being able to address economic development, I think it's very important that everyone in your community is involved in this, and that you must have incentives and you must do whatever is necessary. One analogy that I use with some individuals is it's very similar to from a sports aspect. It's very similar that you're the coach and you're taking your team to the Super Bowl. So you're an elected official, your team is going to the Super Bowl, what are you going to do to get there? You're going to do whatever is necessary for you to win the game. And each and every day, and every challenge that we have, we want safe communities, we want good roads, we want opportunities for new jobs, we want clean communities, we want all of these different things. Those are the things that are going to cause us to be able to win in the community. And that's going to cause us to be able to attract, cause other businesses and others to look at us and say, I think I want to go to that particular city because they're doing some really great things, and I want to be part of that team. And when they come to your community, make it as easy as you possibly can, and you embrace them as if they've been here 50 years. Embrace them and treat them as if they're part of the family and get them involved. And it's amazing how those types of things can happen, and they recognize what the vision is, and from that standpoint, they invest in the vision of helping to grow their cities.
Okay, thank you. I want to convey apologies from Mayor Becker of Salt Lake City, who has a conflict this morning. We're hoping that he will arrive before the panel is over. I'm not sure. But I do have to say that I recently met with Mayor Becker in Salt Lake City. We had breakfast together. He did arrive on his bicycle. And he is very proud of the prosperity that they have brought Salt Lake City, not only in the wake of the Olympics, but generally speaking over the last 10 years. We talked about that at great length. I walked. He rode his bike. So there you go. Both of mayors, both of you mentioned the role of economic development incentives, and I know that having written the Economic Development Column governing since 1995, and thank you, Ellen Ehrenhold in the first row for coming up with the idea that I should write that column in the first place. There is no more controversial topic in economic development than the question of incentives. Both of you indicated that they play a role. Mayor Baker, you mentioned you got to know them. Mayor Brewer, you said they're a part of life. I'd like to ask you a couple of questions about incentives. The first one is, which ones do you find are most effective, and which ones are ones that, although they meant frequently be used, they don't make any difference? And then the second one is, how do you deal with the idea of providing incentives when you're recruiting a new business, when you've got all these businesses already in town playing ball by the rules? Mayor Brewer, why don't you start?
Well, when we start looking at what type of incentive, each incentive is going to be different for each business, depending on what the needs are. And that's why you require the company or whoever the business may be, and also those individuals say, okay, what are you wanting to do? And what's the part that you're short? And it's about filling that gap to be able to, as to what you can accomplish as a business and what do you need us to be able to do. You just don't go out there and say, you know, I'd love to have you, and here's $100 billion in incentives. You just don't do that. You find out what that amount is, and how are you able to do that? And whether it's through some tax abatements, or whether you find some way to be able to fill that gap for them where they can recapture that money, or whether you work some way out for them to be able to bond it or various different other things like that. Even to include, in some cases, you may have to provide some type of cash incentive to close it. Now, when you start doing that, you quite naturally you do the cost analysis, and you have individuals that do those types of things that provide you, what you're getting on your return on your dollar and various things, so that way, when the public asks, you can say, okay, we invested X amount of dollars, or we provided X amount of incentives, but this is how many jobs this is going to create, and this is the economic impact to our community, and oh, by the way, this particular company does exports and various different things of that nature, so that's going to bring in additional revenue to the city. And it's always different things of that nature that you must look at. But it's about filling that gap and meeting the needs of that particular business. But if it's a very good business, you must demonstrate that you're excited, you're interested, and you're wanting to work with them to be able to make sure that this happens.
Mayor Baker. I'm a little confused to have Mayor Baker, Mayor Brewer, and I was going to have Mayor Becker.
That's why he stayed back. In Florida, the incentive programs are in various buckets. They do have an incentive program for a company that is in the state that wants to expand in the state. So as long as they're expanding, creating new jobs, just as a new company comes to town to provide jobs, you can provide economic incentives. Usually it's tax relief, either corporate tax or real estate tax or sales tax or other types of tax relief for the company that's going to be expanding. For the new companies, they have, again, multiple pots. And the way it usually works is you have, as an example, the state's got something called an innovation fund. And the innovation fund can be used with a matching grant from the local government. So in our case, what it usually is, it's half from the state, a quarter from the county, and then a quarter from the city. Now, other counties, they don't require the city, but ours does. And so what our city typically does is uses land as that. So if the city has got land, they can use that throughout the match for that, so that the city doesn't have to come out for cash in that perspective. The state has a return on investment formula that they track based on the projected amount of new jobs. They project how much tax revenues are going to return to the state over a certain period of time. And so how long is it going to take them to recover that investment and get it back? Obviously, the quicker the recovery, the better. The more taxes generated, the more incentive they're willing to give. The state also has clawback provisions, and the counties matches it, so that if the companies don't do what they said they were going to do, they can reach back and take some of the incentives back. And they also now have, with the innovation fund in the state, something interesting, that if the company meets all the projections and is hugely successful, the company pays back the incentive. So the state gets and the county gets the incentive money back at that time. The reality is I think in order to be competitive, you have to know if you're going to try to recruit folks, as other states are doing it, and it really cuts across all political philosophies. So it is being done across the board. But I think there are limits to it. And in Florida, We typically do not have the dollar amount of incentives that other states do, especially the Southeast. And so when we were trying to recoup companies, it was inevitable that somebody else, some other state, had a bigger pile of money on the table than we had a pile of money on the table. And so I'll never forget one time, as an example, I had a company, had all their senior executives in my office, City Hall, and they started telling me, well, you know, so-and-so, I won't say what state it was, but so-and-so state was going to give us all this, and you're only going to give us this. What are you going to do? And my response to them was, well, let me ask you this. Are you going to move with the company? And they said, yes, we are going to. I said, do you have kids? Yes. How old are your kids? Go ahead, so-and-so. So they're going to grow up wherever you are. Yes. And I said, okay, well, you can grow up, you can raise your children in St. Petersburg, which has beaches within 10 minutes of downtown, and it's got a bike path, the biggest bike path system in the southeast United States. It's got parks everywhere, a gorgeous waterfront. It's got culture. It's got a playground within a half-mile walk of every child in the city. It's got all this associated with the quality of life. You can raise your children here, or you can raise them in, I won't say what's there, because you may be out there, so I got to say. But, and when I said that, the look on the face was open. And that company now has 800 employees in St. Petersburg. So you can take the incentives, and I think you have to do the incentives because those executives got to go back to their board of directors and make the case to their board. They may love it, but they got to make the case to their board. This is a good thing for their company. And so you first, in law we used to have an expression. You first have to convince the judge that they want to rule in your favor, and then you have to show the judge how he can rule. And so in economic development, you first have to convince these folks they want to come to your city. And then you got to give them enough ammunition to take back to their boards to be able to do that.
So in the example you described, appealing to the quality of life of the executives themselves wasn't important.
It was the executives and their families, but also they're going to have to recruit people to come work with that company wherever they are.
Where do they want?
Where are you going to go to recruit people to come live?
Brewer, you mentioned that with the downturn in the aircraft industry, you focused a lot on training and retraining. Can you talk a little bit about some of these out-of-work folks, what they've been trained to do, and how successful placement of them has been, and are there other economic sectors in Wichita that have benefited as a result?
Yes. As I said, we had that downturn in our aviation industry, and we focused on training and giving these individuals an opportunity to be able to do something else that they wanted to do. And many of them, large industry, large population of our industry, are probably the baby boomers age. And so by doing that, what it did is it gave them that chance to either get into the medical field. We worked with the various different universities to be able to get them into school. The companies did various different things to be able to assist those laid off workers by helping them or giving them tuition assistance and various different fields of things that they had. In our particular case, we have a training center. We built a multi-million-dollar training facility for manufacturing. And our number one goal was to be number one in manufacturing. We're going to continue to be the air capital of the world, but we had to continue to be able to maintain that quality of work where no one else can compete with us in that particular area. And so what we did is we started training individuals. Maybe they were sheet metal mechanics. Many of them became engineers, went on back to school, became engineers or became draftsmen. They learned CATIA. Some of them went on to technical schools and learned another technical skill. But the other portion is you had some that had saved up and decided, I thought at one time I wanted to do this my entire life. And you have one gentleman that started manufacturing cookies, little small cookies, and he's doing well at it. You had others that opened up restaurants. They did their own businesses. And what we did is we worked with our small business administration, our university, and helped these individuals in establishing their business plans, and working with the banks and being able to get funding so that they could actually open up their businesses. So we saw an increase in some of the small businesses and the increase in some of the retail, or individuals that were actually wanting to do a lawn service or do something different than what they've been doing in the past. So we've seen that those types of things have actually worked very well. But we're actually establishing a track record right now as far as our training is concerned, and we've done it very quickly. Where other countries are coming over just to review our training facility, just in the aviation sector, and seeing what they can actually do. Can they duplicate what we're actually doing in our training sector?
Mm-hmm. So it sounds like actually a couple of different things. One is understanding that you have a skilled labor force in manufacturing. Just because you're the air capital in the world doesn't mean that they have to manufacture aircraft.
That's correct.
You can transition them to other kinds of manufacturing, and the other is helping people move into different sectors. We're almost out of time, but I did want to ask Mayor Baker, in terms of your community and regional identity and your branding, I understand that possibly a certain newspaper has recently decided to change its name.
Yeah, I don't talk about the newspaper anymore.
In case you're wondering, the St. Petersburg Times recently changed its name to the Tampa Bay Times. Apparently, I'm not going to bait Mayor Baker to actually respond to my question.
I'll respond. It was a ridiculous decision, and it was. I probably shouldn't respond too much.
And I'll only add that the St. Petersburg Times no longer owns governing magazine, so I have no dog in that fight anymore. I want to thank both the mayors for being here today. Let's give them a big round of applause.